Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Embrace Aging. My name is Joan Batorf, and before I begin, I do want to acknowledge that the beautiful day on the land on which we're gathered today is the traditional unceded territory of the Silk Okanagan Nation and their peoples. I know some of you might be joining us from elsewhere, and I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners, past and present, of those lands as well. So, as I said, my name is Joan Batorf. I'm a professor here in the School of Nursing at the University of British Columbia's Okanagan campus here in Kelowna. And I'm delighted to welcome you to the 8th annual Okanagan Embrace Aging. And thank you for joining us today. Embrace Aging, over its history, has been co-hosted by both Interior Health and also Interior Savings, and on our campus, the Institute for Healthy Living and Chronic Disease Prevention. So over 8 years ago, we started planning Embrace Aging to raise awareness about positive aging. And once again, we've organized a full program of events throughout the month of March. And I hope you have a chance to have a look at our program for the rest of the month. And if you do, you'll see the sessions are really designed for everyone, young and old alike, and focus on a variety of topics related to healthy aging and ways to improve our quality of life for everyone. Our goal is to inspire everyone to embrace positive aging. You'll notice there's a closed captioning box and mine's on the bottom of my screen. That can be moved to your preferred location, or you can close off the captioning using the button on your menu bar. We will also take questions and comments in the chat box during the presentation. So as any questions or comments come up, I encourage you to type those into the chat box at any time. And there'll be time at the end where we'll read those out to our speakers and engage in conversations around this topic. So to get us started, I'd like to introduce Michelle Smith, a regional practice lead with research and knowledge translation, long-term care and seniors care with Interior Health, who's going to introduce our speakers this morning. Michelle.
Hello, thank you, Joan. So today's session is Unlocking the Future of Healthcare Treatments, how volunteers can help by participating in clinical research. And it's my great pleasure to present our speakers today, who have many years of experience and wisdom and knowledge in clinical research, and passionate about providing excellent care for patients and families. Coleen Adderley, the manager for Clinical Research Department, Interior Health, and Maire McClelland, the Clinical Research Coordinator and a stroke nurse as well at Interior Health. And they were integral to the part of the creation of the Clinical Research Department, Interior Health. So they have a lot of information to share with you. So thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start off by taking this opportunity really to thank everyone for attending our presentation. And a special thank you to Dr. Batorf and Michelle Smith for inviting us to present today. So I thought we would just do a quick touch, a little bit about me. So I have over 12 years of clinical research experience. My experience includes acting as a clinical research coordinator, being a site manager for various both private and institutional research organizations. I've acted as a study monitor. I've helped to develop protocols and get them both ethically approved and approvals through Health Canada, as well as I've sat on the IH Research Ethics Board as both a reviewer and as the Research Ethics Board coordinator. And most recently, as Michelle alluded to, I have had the honor of helping to build and develop the IH Clinical Research Department, where we now actually have 3 functional clinical research units in our organization. So what is clinical research? Clinical research is a type of observational or interventional research which can be used to evaluate medications, treatments, or devices that is given to a research participant, really to learn how well it works, how safe it is, and what types of side effects you may have. This type of research involves human participants, which can be done either through direct interactions with the participants or through the collection and analysis of blood, tissue, or other samples. And basically, the knowledge that's gained helps physicians and researchers and care providers to determine new ways to diagnose, treat, and prevent health issues. So one quick thing to note is clinical research is often referred to as clinical trials as well. So there are two types of clinical research, so observational and interventional trials. Observational clinical research, participants receive routine care by their doctor, and they're often observed by a research staff without any study-specific activities being introduced. So for example, in an emergency department at Kelowna General Hospital and various health authorities across BC and Canada, there is an ED COVID registry that's currently happening. And this registry captures de-identified information about study participants and their symptoms, with hope that the information that's gathered will help to inform clinical decision-making tools for emergency departments in the future. Now, interventional trials, on the other hand, is a type of research which participants receive a study-specific treatment, so whether it's a drug, medical device, or medical procedure, or even a lifestyle modification, so such as diet, which may be compared to other treatments or current standard of care. Clinical trials are often used to determine the safest route and most effective treatment for that condition. So for example, a clinical trial that involves cardiac patients being given a higher dose of a flu vaccine in comparison to a regular dose of a flu vaccine to see whether or not it prevents cardiac patients from having the flu over the course of that year. So why are clinical trials conducted? So clinical trials are conducted to see if new medications, treatments, or devices are safe and effective for people to use. We look at it to compare two or more existing medications, treatments, or devices to determine which one is better. We use it to study new ways to use approved medications, whether it's a treatment or a device. So for example, using birth control to clear acne, or using an antidepressant, for example, to treat fibromyalgia. And we also use clinical research to learn how to best use the medications or the treatments or devices in different populations, such as the elderly or children. So on the screen here, what you see is a drug development process. So there are 4 stages that a drug development has to go through before it actually can be marketed. So in the first stage, which is the in vitro and in vivo testing, before a sponsor can initiate any type of testing in humans, extensive preclinical and laboratory research is required. So if this stage of testing is actually successful, then the sponsor provides the data that they are able to collect, and they submit it to the FDA and Health Canada to be able to secure approvals for testing to happen in humans. So this stage takes roughly 1 to 3 years to complete. Then they transition into stage 2, which actually will go more in depth in shortly. But during this stage, this is where the testing in humans actually begins. So to complete all 3 of the phases, it roughly takes anywhere from 2 to 10 years to complete. And if a study drug or device is proved to be beneficial after all 3 phases have been completed, then the sponsors actually can take all of their data and they submit a request to the regulatory bodies such as Health Canada or the FDA to review it and hopefully secure approval for that drug to be marketed, or device, sorry. So that's where we see the data review in the stage 3 on the slide here. That stage 3 data review takes approximately anywhere from 2 months to 7 years to complete. So quite a long time they take to evaluate the information that has been gained. And then once the drug is actually marketed, then a surveillance portion actually happens, and that's where stage 4 happens. And the surveillance stage basically looks at the drug or device once it's become available for use in the market, and the sponsors are required, or the drug companies are required, to submit information back to Health Canada or the FDA about the drug over a certain time period. So an interesting fact actually to let you know is, according to research that was done by Mark Terry, which was published in March of 2020, he noted that the median cost to actually get a drug to market is approximately $985 million. So it's quite expensive to get a drug to market, but obviously at the end of the day, it helps us all. So on the screen here are the 3 phases of interventional trial, which we're going to talk about more in depth right now. So these are 3 critical phases of getting a drug to market. And these phases include differences from phase to phase, which enables a sponsor to capture critical information that's vital in determining whether or not the drug is suitable for use. So for example, in phase 1, they test a drug on a very small number of healthy volunteers. And really the goal is to establish overall safety, to identify any side effects, and determine the dose level and make sure that they're safe and tolerable for human use. Phase 1 trials are typically conducted with a small group of 20 to 80 participants and over the course of anywhere from 6 to 12 months. This phase is an open labeled phase whereby no blinding occurs. So that means that both the patient and the study doctor know that the patient is receiving the study drug. So once phase 1 is complete and they determine that it's safe for human use, then we transition into phase 2. And in phase 2, the drug is tested on a small number of people who have the condition that the drug is designed to treat. So unlike phase 1, where they tested on completely healthy individuals, this one, if the drug is being developed to test, for example, cardiac issue, they're going to give it to the cardiac patients. Now, these trials are designed to establish how well it works, to look at what the dose range should be, and to observe any safety concerns that might arise. So this phase typically involves anywhere from 100 to 300 participants. Once this phase is complete, it will transition then into a phase 3 trial. During phase 3, the drug is again tested on a larger number of individuals who have the condition, and it is designed, basically the condition that it's designed to treat. And that this phase is usually structured as a large-scale, multi-centered, randomized control trial to see how much better the new product is, either than no treatment at all, so which we would refer to as a placebo, or whatever is the best treatment currently on the market that's available. So we often refer that to as a standard of care. So side effects are noted and investigated, and the dose schedule in this phase should be as close as possible to what it should be anticipated when they actually market the drug. So this phase typically involves anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 participants. And after this phase, if successful, the sponsor reviews the data and they collate all the information. And at that point, that's where they determine whether or not it's a go or no go decision in terms of whether or not they apply to the regulatory bodies to be able to market that drug. If they decide to proceed, a new drug application is then filed to the regulatory bodies, and that's where either Health Canada or the FDA would review this and determine, one, is it effective for the population? Do the benefits outweigh the risks? And is the proposed labeling for the product appropriate? If at such time the regulatory bodies feel that it is beneficial for human consumption or for human use, then they approve the product to be marketed. And as I alluded to earlier, phase 4 is where we can investigate the use for other conditions or on a broader patient base. For example, elderly patients, or for long-term use, also referred to as post-marketing surveillance. And then they look at recommended uses also can be amended as a result of these studies. So for example, if they're noticing that a larger population of people are having side effects at the 300 milligram dose level, they may recommend to lower that dose range to 250 milligrams instead, for example. So why participate? By participating, you may help researchers find the safest options. By monitoring treatments closely and watching for side effects, researchers basically learn to see how safe that treatment is. The best treatments. By comparing 2 or more treatments, researchers learn to see which treatment actually works better for that population. We want to make sure the uses are right. So by finding new ways and methods to use existing treatments, researchers may advance medicine, for example, using an antidepressant to treat fibromyalgia. And we also want to make sure it's the right patients. So by testing in different groups of people, such as elderly and children, researchers learn who would be most who would most benefit from it. So what are the benefits of participating? You know, we are able to discover new treatment options. It benefits both yourself and others. You, by participating, help to contribute to advancing medicine, and it also helps Canadians get healthier. So are there any potential risks? Healthcare professionals work really, really hard to make sure we minimize the risks, but it's really important to know that there's potential risks before agreeing to participate. So before you agree to participate, the study coordinator would review all of the potential risks with you in depth, and you would be closely monitored throughout the entire trial. Some of the risks that could be included is uncertain benefits from treatments or devices. We're not 100% certain of the potential side effects, and also what the treatment might change. So basically, it's up to you. Participating in a clinical trial is completely voluntary. When you're invited to participate in a trial, even after you've started the clinical trial, you have the right to decide if you wish to take part and continue at any point. So you are welcome to withdraw at any time for any reason without having to provide a reason and without it affecting your medical care. Confidentiality of your information is maintained at all times, and the information that's collected about you and your health will be protected at all times. It's the law. And even after you've completed the trial or you've left the trial early, your information still remains confidential. So here is actually a slide of some of the clinical research coordinators that we have in Interior Health. As you can see, both myself and Marie are actually included in this. So Clinical Research Department was actually developed in 2017, and we've supported a multitude of clinical trials since inception. Currently, as it stands, we have 3 clinical research units, one located in Kelowna at Kelowna General Hospital, one at the Royal Inland Hospital, and one at the Penticton Regional Hospital. We have 2 additional research sites that are coming up, one at Verdun and Jubilee and one at East Kootenay Regional Hospital. As you can see by the slide here, this is kind of a quick snapshot of some of the studies that we're currently focusing on right now. So now I have the pleasure of turning over this presentation to Marie, who's going to share with you some of the trials that we've worked on and how they've helped to improve care. Marie?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As Coleen did, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about me. It's been a long time I've been doing this job. I've been a registered nurse from 1975 to the present. I started clinical research in Calgary, and I joined the Calgary Stroke Program at that time and did that for about 10 years. I then came back home to Kelowna, this is where I'm originally from, and worked for a year with BC Cancer as a research coordinator, and then went to the emergency department here at KGH. And then thankfully, to my great delight, we opened a clinical research department in Interior Health, first here in Kelowna, and that's when I joined. And continue to enjoy doing this and expanding our knowledge about all areas of medicine. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, and I'm having problems advancing my slide, sorry. Joan, can you just tell me where I get the control to advance?
Marie, it should be at the bottom of the monitor. It might be like a ghost, or you can just usually click on the right-hand side of your monitor to advance.
Okay, maybe I've got it now. Okay, so sorry about that. So one of the questions that a lot of people have is, you know, why do clinical research, and Coleen very nicely outlined that. And to bring it down to a finer point is, how can clinical research improve care in my community? And I'm going to discuss 2 clinical research projects that have been done here. One is still ongoing. The first one is Spectra. That one's now complete, and the Frontier Stroke Study that we are still enrolling in. So the early benefits of research in the community is all about the education. Before we can start a clinical project, we have to let all of the caregivers know that are going to be impacted by this. And special education goes to them regarding the research project, but also how, if they need more knowledge about a specific condition, we will also provide that. So it improves their knowledge and improves the care that they provide on a day-to-day basis to patients who may have that condition, whether they're in the clinical trial or not. So when we break it down, we explain what disease we're studying. We explain the project itself and the purpose or rationale for doing it. How it will involve those care providers, what we're going to be asking them to do. And like I said earlier, specific training if their involvement is going to be different from the standard of care. So 2 studies that we've done here, as I said earlier, Spectra, it's a formalized tool. It's now being implemented in the emergency department at KGH. It was conducted in 2017, shortly after we started our department, and it involved assessing a tool for standardization and streamlining of a referral process by the ED physicians to the TIA stroke clinic. The other study was the Frontier Study that we started in 2018. It's currently running, and it involves a joint partnership between Interior Health and BC Ambulance. I apologize for this. For some reason or other, my cursor is being very temperamental. It just doesn't want to do what I want it to do. Let's see if I can get back to the okay, so the Spectra study. The purpose was to evaluate a standardized form for physicians to use for assessment and referral of patients presenting to the emergency department with transient stroke symptoms or transient ischemic attack. The results of the Spectra study was an improved, more efficient referral process for the emergency department, decreased unnecessary imaging in the emergency department, easier for TIA stroke clinic to triage referrals for appropriateness and priority, and shorter wait times for patients to see a neurologist in the TIA stroke clinic. Overall, these results did improve patient care, decrease wait times, and it's saving healthcare dollars as well. The Spectra form is currently being used in the KGH emergency department with plans to expand its use, hopefully to other centers at in IH, sorry, and perhaps to family physicians when they have patients who present to their office with this complaint. So the Frontier Stroke Study that started in Kelowna in February of 2018. This is a BC-wide study. Currently, we have enrolled 77 patients in this study. It is a double-blind, placebo-controlled study of a neuroprotective drug called nerinotide. And what we mean by that is it protects the brain when a person is having a stroke. It's a novel peptide that blocks the effect of nitric oxide. This is a naturally occurring chemical mediator in the body that is responsible for much of the brain damage that occurs with a stroke. The placebo is normal saline. And it's thought to give us 5 hours. So it's a 10-minute infusion. It's in the bloodstream for about 15 minutes after that. It is inside the brain cells for about 5 hours. All persons involved, including the patient and medical staff, are blinded as to what the patient receives. The study will be unblinded when enrollment is completed, and participants will be notified as to what they received. We have approximately 450 patients enrolled, and we need less than 100 to complete enrollment in BC. And like I said, we expect that to occur early in 2022. At the time when the paramedics respond to a call for a person with stroke symptoms, they follow very specific criteria, and in consultation with an emergency physician, the paramedics enroll these patients before transport to the hospital. Also at this time, patients or their family are briefly informed about the study at the scene, and if there are no objections, the patient is enrolled and the paramedics proceed with giving them either, like they don't know, either the study drug neranotide or the placebo. Afterwards, when they are admitted to the hospital, the clinical research coordinator obtains full informed consent from the patient or their family for continued assessments and follow-up. Health Canada has approved this study and the use of the deferred consent process. So what we have observed so far, every time I click on this, it wants to jump ahead by 2 slides. So what we've observed so far is that the extra education given to the BC Ambulance paramedics has resulted in their improved ability to recognize stroke symptoms. Their handover to the emergency staff, to the neurologist and the stroke team is much more efficient, and we've been able to decrease our response times quite significantly as a result. Also, the increased education and support to the frontline care providers in the emergency department has also resulted in improved care and treatment of stroke. And it's most heartening to see the engagement that we get from all of these frontline care providers and how engaged they are in clinical research, and they want to know more about it. They educate themselves. It's a very positive thing. So we know and we believe that clinical research helps us improve health outcomes for our patients and families. If you're interested in getting involved, I have a couple of slides I'm going to share with you next. The ultimate goal is putting knowledge gained from research into action and practice. As a health authority, we want to see health system change and improvements that enhance care for the people we serve. As Coleen also said earlier, we promote knowledge translation support so that researchers can share the results with the Interior Health staff and administrators who are asked to support research at Interior Health sites and programs. We aim to build capacity for research promotion, knowledge dissemination and mobilization, and developmental activities, thus enhancing a culture of research in interior health. So Reach BC is one way that the general public can get involved in research. Their website is listed on this slide. If you're interested in getting involved, please visit this website. You can search by health topic for research projects you might be interested in. You can sign up as a Research BC volunteer to create your own profile and be matched to studies. And you can also connect with researchers and participate in research. So how it works is listed on this slide. So you, as I just mentioned, you can create your own profile. You can get matched with research opportunities by email, and you can review it and decide if you want to connect with them. Thank you so much for listening and putting up with the problems that I seem to be having with this computer. If you have any questions or comments, you can contact Coleen or myself. And I know that the organizers have also provided some time for us to answer any questions that you may have posted. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Marie and Colleen. I was listening to Joe was going to talk, or I was going to talk. I had a question, if I can. Can you talk more about, so that Reach BZ is an example of how you can connect to look kind of what's out there and kind of keep an eye on what projects come forward that you might be interested in. And I think sometimes people wonder too, when the clinical research coordinators have a study that they're going into, say, a community or like a hospital, how does that process look to the person? So you come in and you want to share that with them. How would that look to them? With the consent process, like when you're looking for, when participants, like say in Kelowna General Hospital, and there's a study coming up and there might be potential people, what would they expect to talk to the clinical research coordinator about?
What usually happens is the physician who is that patient's primary physician or is working in conjunction with the physician who's running a study at the hospital will ask the patient if they might be interested in participating in research and would they be amenable to having a clinical research coordinator come and discuss a study with them. And if the patient says yes, then that physician will notify us and we will go to their unit, wherever they are in the hospital, and introduce ourselves and speak to them about the study. And we, at that time, will stress that they may not meet criteria for this study, or after hearing more about it from us, they may feel that it doesn't fit them very well or they don't want to participate. I'm always very impressed with how many people are willing to take that leap of faith and listen to us more and who actually become enrolled in our studies. And one of the side benefits to taking part in studies been quite well illustrated in research over the last 20 to 30 years is that participating in studies, although there may not be a direct beneficial outcome from the study itself, you do get closer scrutiny and another person who can advocate for you and perhaps help you navigate through the healthcare system.
Marie, can you also talk a little bit about the consent process and the consent form? I've seen some of those consent forms and they're like 6 pages long. Sometimes the language is very complicated. Can you talk a little bit about how you help people understand the consent form, how much time you give them to review it, what assurances they have about that they actually understand what they're consenting to?
Certainly. So actually a 6-page consent form in our world would be considered
Probably short.
A short one, yes. For some cancer studies, you can have chapters and up to 20 or 30 pages of consent form to go through. In our department, most of our studies, the consents aren't that lengthy. So what we will do is explain the study briefly to the patient, ask them if they want to have a look at the consent form. We give them a consent form to read through and ask them how much time do they think they'll need. It is dependent on how many tests they've got booked, how busy their care is on the unit, whether or not they want to consult with family members, and we encourage all of that. Sometimes we are also faced with a time crunch in that the patients are only going to be in hospital for a very short period of time, and they have to be enrolled and started on study drug or treatment before discharge. So we will explain that to them. The other thing that we are required to do, and this is part of our training, is we need to go through each section of the consent form with the person and make sure they understand each section, ask questions, ask them to ask us questions, explain how the privacy works. Also reassure them that if they say yes now to going into the study, they can say no at any later date. All they have to do is contact us. With some studies, obviously, if it's trialing a medication, we have to make sure they're aware that they can't just stop the medication without consulting with a physician first, usually the study physician, who will then collaborate with their physician to make sure that they are still getting appropriate treatment for whatever condition we're looking at.
Great, that's very helpful. In this little interlude, I see Jaquetta has encouraged people to put their questions or comments in the chat box, and I'll just reiterate that verbally as well. We'd be happy to take any additional questions and comments. One of the things that you didn't talk about is the kind of review that is done prior to studies starting to make sure all the checks and balances are in place. And by that, I'm talking about the ethics review. I'm wondering if you can just speak to that a little bit in terms of some of these trials, for example, that are actually initiated by drug companies. How do we know as a patient considering a drug trial that this whole protocol has been carefully reviewed and the request to participate is legitimate, etc.?
I'm going to offer this opportunity to Coleen and see if she wants to jump in, although I'm quite happy to speak to it as well. Coleen?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Marie. So whether it's a pharma company or an individual sponsor or a physician that is wanting to be able to develop a research protocol and get approval to be able to run the study, there is extensive reviews that have to happen. So for example, if a drug company wants to have a site run their research trial, what they need to do is, one, send a copy of their protocol along with an application to Health Canada or to the FDA, depending on where the study is being run. But obviously in Canada here, we need to go through Health Canada. And they actually do an extensive review of the protocol, and they look at the informed consent document as well. And based on their review of the protocol, they actually look and do an extensive literature search as well, which it is required by the pharma company to provide them with reasons why that particular drug needs to be developed and what the intention and goal of it is to support. And then once they get the approval from Health Canada by ways of a no objection letter, then what they do is they approach different research sites. And then the research sites, so for example, Marie would submit a ethics application to our ethics board. And our ethics board looks at it to ensure that one, is safe for our patients to use, and two, that it's basically being done ethically. So they look at all of the different areas within the study. They're looking to make sure that the physicians aren't making money off of this. They're making sure that if the side effects if there are potential side effects, that the benefits outweigh the side effects, how safe it is for the patients. So they basically look at the ethical side of it. And then once we are able to secure ethical approval, then at that point in time, we actually have to submit an operational approval. So the institution then approves us to be able to conduct the study. And once we have all of the three approvals, so the no objection letter, the ethical approval from our institution, our research ethics board, and then the operational approval, then at that time, we're actually able to proceed with conducting the trial. So it does go through rigor review. And basically at the end of the day, the studies that we offer and present are being done because it is felt that the benefits will outweigh the risks, and that this is the only way we can look at hopefully getting new drug to market.
Great, that's really helpful.
I would just add something that process can sometimes take upwards of 6 months. Rigorous doesn't come close to describing how it is for some studies.
And do patients have to worry if they decide, I guess there's always a concern, I think, among many patients that I know that are considering a clinical trial, that if they say no to the trial, that somehow the fact that they've said no might influence their future healthcare. And what reassurances can you provide for patients about that?
Absolutely. So there's two things. A process that we've implemented with Interior Health is we actually remove the physician from seeking consent. Because physicians are seen in a position of power, we don't want patients to sign up to participate in a study because they think that they don't want to let their physician down, or they think that, you know, the physician's going to cure me, therefore I need to do what he's recommending. So by having the study coordinator actually consent the patient, it takes a little bit of that pressure off the study participant. In addition, the research coordinator really does go through an in-depth review with the patient and make sure that they understand that at any time, if they choose to withdraw from the study, they're not penalized for it. And if they choose to participate in the study, it's not because they're wanting to please their physician, it's because this is something that both they and their family feels that is important for them. Marie, do you want to add anything?
Only that everybody is going to get the very, very best care, standard of care that is currently in practice, and participating in clinical research is over and above that. So if you take that away, if you say, no, I don't want to be in this anymore, or it's not a good fit, I can't make all the visits, whatever, you're still going to continue getting the very best standard of care that can be provided to you.
Great, thank you. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but encourage people to add any. Michelle, do you have any additional questions?
I think one extra comment / question is that it's not all studies that want to be in interior health are able to. There's a feasibility check that the physician may be interested in a study and they want to know. It has to work for the clinical research department and the physician and the patients. And so just because someone wants to be involved and do a study does not mean that they are able to. So that's, I don't know if anyone wants to add to that, but that's always an important piece that people don't maybe always realize, is that they have to meet the needs of what we need here as a priority.
Great. Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of things that have to be perfectly aligned to make this all work for everybody. And that's maybe a good thing, so that the studies are conducted as safely as possible and provide the best possible information. So I guess the other thing I sort of wonder about, if I was a participant in a study, would I hear about the findings, and how would I hear about findings? How would I know that my participation made a difference?
Depending on the study and what the agreement is with the sponsor, and in my past experience, all of my participants have been informed of what they received, especially in placebo-controlled studies, double-blinded placebo-controlled studies. So at the end of this study, when they have completed enrollment, they've completed all follow-up, and they've crunched their data and they're ready for publication, then they will give permission to the sites to contact all of the participants that they enrolled at that site. And they will give you a log of your patients and what they received. So then we would contact our patients either by phone or by letter, sometimes both. We may also include a very brief description of the study findings, or give them a method by which they can go to a website, clinicaltrials.gov, and find out what the study's results were. Is that clear?
Yeah, that is helpful. And I'm assuming that if I was a patient in a clinical trial, I might have to wait a while for that.
That's correct. It typically takes 6 months to a year for when a study is completed enrollment, depending how big it is. And if it's an international study, there's always a lot of pressure to try and get that information out as soon as possible. And so like I said, it takes 6 months to a year. The general press will also get a hold of this, the general media, and report it with varying degrees of clarity. We try hard to make sure that they get it right, but if you want more detailed information, like I say, clinicaltrials.gov is a website that lists all trials that are being conducted worldwide, which ones are currently enrolling, which ones are completed, and what their findings were.
That's great.
And you can search, can you search by drug as well, or Marie, if you're curious about a particular, what trials it's been through already, or?
Yes, you can.
Great.
Sometimes it will take you to the company website, but I'm going to ask Coleen if she knows a little bit more about that than I do.
Yeah, so often the drugs, when they're going through phases, are typically a numbered drug if they haven't developed a name yet. So if you've been involved in a research study and you want to know the outcome, but it was a numbered drug, it might be a little bit harder to look it up. But definitely reach out to your research site and see whether or not they've been provided information back. Or alternatively, you can look at the drug company's website. They often have publications on there as well, or clinicaltrials.gov. So there's kind of 3 avenues, so you can look at it if it's a numbered drug as opposed to a drug that's been given a name at that point. So if you keep your informed consent document, it'll have that information listed, what the drug name is or what the drug ID number is within your consent form. So then you can go back and look to see if you can find more information.
So I guess one thing that comes up for me as well is that, and I think there was something in the news recently about some medical devices that, you know, obviously went through testing, were approved for use, and then years later, patients who received these medical devices, whether they be IUDs or whatever they might be, end up having significant problems. And so I guess it makes me wonder why these might not have been picked up during the trial, and why we hear this in the news about problems with medical devices or even some medications for that, you know, years later, causing problems that we hadn't foreseen in the first place.
That's a great question. So basically in that phase 4 trial that I was showing you, after the drug is marketed or the device is marketed, the challenge with studies is that they typically are either done, you know, over the course of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, sometimes up to 5 years. But it's that surveillance period. So after a drug or device is marketed, for the first 2 years, sponsors are required to actually report outcomes every 6 months. And then after the 2-year period, they are required for the next 5 years to report outcomes on a monthly basis. So they still collect data, but obviously not as quickly as possible, or sorry, I should say, not as, you know, not as extensive as if you were involved in a clinical trial. And again, those clinical trials are typically run over shorter periods. So while we are able to investigate the drug, if the study is only conducted, let's say over 1 or 2 years, that we're giving the patient the drug, you know, what happens 5 years down the road, we're not certain. So which is why we have that surveillance phase. I can tell you with 100% certainty that Health Canada monitors this very, very closely, and they take it very seriously. So often you're going to see that there's drug and devices that are available in the US that we actually can't get in Canada, or was available in Canada, but Health Canada then in turn, over the surveillance, has said, you know what, we have noticed that X amount of serious adverse events have been submitted based on this drug. So therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to halt having any Canadians be able to receive this drug or this device. They're looking out of the best interest of us, and that surveillance piece is so critical. You know, like I mentioned, the studies are run over a short period of time, so it makes it really hard for a drug company to be able to predict what long-term outcomes look like. So when a drug is removed, and you've seen there's been lots of different drugs that have been removed from market, it's truly up to the regulatory body within that country. So Health Canada, it has a lot stricter rules than the FDA. And I'm not saying that the FDA doesn't, you know, watch closely over their population, but the reality is what their requirement or their restrictions are different than what Health Canada has set as requirements. But it is monitored and it is assessed. So when the drug or the device is not deemed to be appropriate for use for human use, they pull it from the market right away. And the expectation is either the drug company has to alter that medication and put it back through drug trials again, or they completely remove that drug or device from the market altogether.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, this has been really, really helpful. I don't see any questions in the chat box, so I'm wondering if you have any final comments for Marie or Coleen that you'd like to share with our audience.
The only thing I think I would like to say is, you know, if you are interested in either participating in clinical research or supporting research in some way, there are lots of options. Obviously, you can either participate if you're offered that opportunity within a hospital setting, for example, or you can look through Reach BC and you can contact them to see whether or not there's opportunities of participating. Alternatively, if you're more on the reluctant side to participate in a study, you can support research by donations. And there's foundations at the hospital, there's a foundation at the University of UBC. So there's lots of different opportunities and ways that you can support research, but by supporting research, it's what is going to help to advance care and contribute to furthering the ability for us to provide proper care to patients. So, you know, I encourage you to look into it. And, you know, if you have any questions or you want further information, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. My name is Coleen Adderley and my contact information is on the screen, as is Marie's, and we would be more than happy to support and answer any questions you may have.
That's great. That seems like a really great place to conclude. And I just might add that there are also opportunities sometimes for patients to actually be part of research teams as patient representatives on research teams as well. And that's becoming much more common, both in interior health as well as at UBC. So that's one other option. And also, we have some studies ongoing at UBC as well, that there's lots of opportunities for people to participate. And as you can imagine, they cross over the various faculties. And so the Institute for Healthy Living and Chronic Disease Prevention also has a tab on its website where people, researchers at UBC are recruiting patients or people in the community who may be able to even participate in interviews that would support health research as well. So another place to look. But this has been really great. I want to close by thanking both Marie and Coleen and Michelle for joining us today, and particularly Michelle for helping us coordinate this session, and to you, Coleen and Marie, for giving us such a comprehensive review of what it's like to be involved in health research. And I'd like to close by also thanking everyone who joined us today as well, and hope you have an opportunity to join one of our future sessions. Check out our website for Embrace Aging if you haven't already. Thanks again, and bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.